gentlemen, I wore the same tie as in that video on purpose, clearly. So there are different meetings going on this week for the different themes in the government plan, but this evening the focus is on how we're going to reduce income inequality and improve the standard of living. So we're going to do this by improving the quality and affordability of housing, improving social inclusion, and by removing barriers to and at work. And as Housing Minister, I'm going to highlight the first of these and then hand over to Deputy Martin. And once we've given the overview, then of course we'll be open for questions. By 2023, we want to improve the availability and affordability of good quality housing. The work to achieve this has already begun and will continue during 2020. There are facts to do with the affordability of housing that we all know from having read various reports, but we know that the ratio of income to house price is too high. In 2017, the average price of a 3-bedroom house was 8 times the average household income. And it's high cost which put home ownership out of reach for many people and makes it a struggle for ordinary people to afford to live in the kind of home that they and their family need. So what are we going to do? The Housing Policy Development Board has been formed, and its job is to take a long-term view of the market and consider options which include ensuring appropriate renting and ownership choices are available to islanders, helping with housing costs, increasing the supply of land and finance, maximising the use of existing stock, and considering options for reducing the cost of building new homes. And that board is also doing work on social housing rents, which is an incredibly important issue. So next year we're going to publish the board's review of housing in Jersey, and we'll begin to develop detailed plans to implement any agreed recommendations that come about as a result of that work. But we're also going to improve the support and protection for tenants. An independent report has recommended that we help all tenants find appropriate accommodation and to understand their rights, and I think we need to improve tenants' rights in many areas as well. So one thing we'll be doing is establishing a housing advice service which will hopefully be able to assist islanders their various housing needs. We'll also implement the outcomes of the homelessness strategy, which is work which is ongoing at the moment and extremely important to me. We're going to aim to bring forward regulations to control letting agent fees. Many of us, I'm sure, will be aware of instances where fees have been charged which are simply unjustifiable, and work has been done to crack down on this in other jurisdictions so we can't fall behind. And we're going to extend the key worker accommodation scheme, including providing a clear definition of the roles that it will include. And many of you will be aware that the Care Inquiry released its 2-year-on report today, and I think that highlights the importance of dealing with this issue. So that's what we aim to do next year. But the government plan sets out our direction until 2023, and over that time we'll be spending an additional £22.7 million on these priorities. And on top of that, I'm delighted that an additional £10 million has been earmarked for 2021 to help islanders who are currently unable to purchase homes on the open market. So that's a short overview of how we're going to improve the standard of living for islanders through housing, and I now hand over to Deputy Martin, who will give you an overview of their areas.
Thank you and good evening. With an ageing population and a good life expectancy, we want to help islanders be better prepared for later in life. We will look at whether our workplace pension scheme would be right for Jersey and all that that entails, and we will do a lot of consultation on that. And other ways to support people to remain financially independent in their latter years. It is important that our laws are kept up to date to reflect modern society, which is why we are reviewing the way married women and couples are treated in relation to income tax. The Minister for Treasury and Resources will be bringing forward recommendations to the Assembly on this matter before the government plan is debated. The states will also be discussing family-friendly employment rights next month, and next year we are also looking to extend the benefit support we provide so that either parent can claim a benefit when looking after a new baby. We know that remaining in or returning to employment is good for people's well-being, so we'll be developing plans next year so that we can best support people with long-term health conditions to do so. Ensuring that everyone, regardless of age or disability, has easy access to our services is one of our very top priorities. This is why we are developing the disability strategy and looking at how we can deliver more of our services, both in the community, through closer to home, which is a great scheme and is going to be expanding, and also in people's homes. Senator Mesnick's just said the one priority that we have got this extra 10 million to provide housing. How that's going to happen, we're not quite sure, but it is good news. And now I'm going to hand over back to Senator Farnham, the Deputy Chief Minister.
Thank you.
Right, improvisation. So thank you very much. We'll take questions now. I would ask, ladies and gentlemen, if we could keep the subject on this particular issue of the government plan, or generally the government plan initially, and we're aiming to finish at 8 o'clock latest. So it's over to you.
Mark Scott. I've got a question. I think it probably is best answered by Senator Mesick, and it's about housing. How will you ensure that fewer houses are allowed to become dilapidated or subsumed into private estates, depriving people of potential housing?
Part of that will be discussed in the island plan and how land across the island is distributed for particular purposes. But in terms of what support we can provide people who own these properties that we're not getting the best use out of, whether that's from selling them on to people to live in or whether it's to rent them to people, this is something that the Housing Policy Development Board is looking at. At this point, I'm not going to be able to say what the exact solution to that is in terms of what support could be provided, but it's something that is on the agenda of the Housing Policy Development Board, because we recognise that we are not getting the best use of the housing stock that we have in the island in terms of properties which are under-occupied, or properties that are falling into disrepair and not being put to good use. And so there's been a focus on the stick approach through environmental health in recent years. We've had much greater powers and regulations on minimum standards, which is really positive and important. But in terms of the carrot approach that we can take to support those who are trying to do the right thing, but for whatever obstacles they're facing can't do that, provide what support we can to enable them to improve those properties so that they can actually be used properly. Supplementary?
It half answered my question because in my experience I've witnessed existing houses being subsumed into private estates as guest cottages. So, you know, in say the wealthier parts of the island, and when you say that the island plan is going to address it, well, I've been looking at the island plan survey quite intensively, and I don't really see. I mean, there is a policy in there; it just isn't particularly enforced that strongly. So I guess there's that element of enforcement, but also just the island plan in terms of addressing these issues. It doesn't currently seem that the survey asks those questions, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, part of this will be for the Environment Minister. The only aspect of this I can address for what falls vaguely within my responsibilities. You mentioned about the wealthy buying up properties to subsidy their estates. I think that there's an issue there, and it's something that I think we absolutely need to look at, because it's not right that people are deprived of the opportunity to own a home or live in a decent rented home, and this being concentrated instead in the hands of too few people. But it doesn't directly fall within my responsibility in terms of that sort of regulation. The Environment Minister would be better placed to give an answer on that, I think.
Good evening. I understood the theme of tonight's meeting to be the reduction of inequality of income. Now, you may excuse me, but from what I've heard so far, I have not really quite seen your strategies, how you're going to put more money into the pockets of those people who are on low incomes. So I'm not sure which bit I'm missing. I mean, I have heard nothing, for instance, about what's the government going to do about say, gender pay gap in the UK that's being investigated and looked into. We are not looking into this in Jersey. We've got no stats, we've got no policies to reduce that by any means and any percentage. I have heard nothing about people who are on a low income, who may be not able to work quite so much because they've got childcare needs, because they've got parent care needs, because they've got mental health conditions, because they've got physical health conditions. How are those people going to get more money into their pockets? Because they're the ones who are struggling because of inequality in income. So I was really looking forward to this meeting to hear your strategies, how you're going to address that, because part of the island plan says we need to put children first. Children are also coming mostly within a family context. As long as families, parents, grandparents are in precarious income situations, these kids are never going to be put first, because people are worried sick about how they're going to put a roof over their head and food on their table. That also applies to people who have got no children. So I would be really grateful if you could give me some answers about what are your actual plans to reduce income inequality in this island in the next couple of years. Thank you very much.
Excellent points. I'll hand over to Judy. I'll hand over to Judy for the majority of the answer, but just on the so people spend a very large proportion of their incomes on rent. We have high rates of rental stress in the island. So two things that I briefly referenced up there that will have an impact, I hope, on improving people's standard of living. Is dealing with the 90% market rate rule in social housing. Work is ongoing for that. I've also mentioned about letting agent fees. People are spending money that, when renting property in other jurisdictions, they would not be spending, and that puts them in a precarious situation with their rental situation. That's got to be dealt with as well, but I'll hand over to Judy for the rest.
Yes, people who have care needs, and we are looking at that. We're looking at people in ordinary childcare, and also people who have got a caring need, as you say, might be for mum or a child. We're working with them. We have got some money to do this. We've had the disability strategy since 2017, but didn't really have a lot of money. We're working with the voluntary sector, and it's all about getting people into the right jobs, earning like we are as a government, paying, aiming to pay, if we're not already doing it in most places, the living wage.
I can't live off the living wage in Jersey. I've tried, it doesn't work. I can't pay my rent on a living wage in Jersey, let alone my food. It doesn't work.
Well, there's not many people who do they're either minimum wage or there's somewhere higher than that. And if you're saying to me, I'm only going by what the people who are looking at the living wage say, it should be 10, 20, 10, 30 an hour, and people can live on that. Obviously, then if you need support for as Sam, it goes back to the big circle of the elephant in the room is the amount of money you pay out of your wage in rent. And we do need to address that, but we can help people. We just need to look at it across the board, and if you know, you say you can't live on the living wage, and I wouldn't be surprised you could if you've got children and rent to pay. So we have money to look at where we can improve this, and it probably doesn't address all your answers, but we are definitely got work to do, and we're looking at financial support in older life. You know, we need to start planning for that now, because people who are 20, 25 now never think they're going to get to 65 and they think the state's going to support them. They need to, you know, we need to sort of make some inquiries about what will work in Jersey and really think about this and talk to people.
Just one extra point on that. Just when we talk about income inequality, the conversation tends to focus on people on lower incomes, which is obviously right and entirely understandable, but it does also involve talking about what people on higher incomes are contributing as well. And I think a positive part of this government plan is the raising of the social security cap, and that will also be on LTC as well, which means to a degree those with broader shoulders are going to be asked to contribute more than they otherwise have the previous years, and that's a good thing because that money then goes into public services that proportionately benefit those on lower incomes more. So that is a progressive thing that's in this that's worth supporting.
Well, gentlemen.
Good evening. I'm quite interested listening to the presentation you're giving. It seems premised on a premise that I find hard to recognise, which is this idea that the economy is doing really, really well. And I'm looking at statistics here which show, this is from the Jersey's government website, which shows that average incomes per head in Jersey have gone down from 54,000 19 years ago to 42,000 now. That's wealth divided by the population. The elephant in the room to me here seems to be that we're increasing the population at an enormously high rate, and it's impossible for growth to keep pace with that. And similarly, it's impossible to build houses fast enough to keep pace with that. And whilst we're doing those things, we can't even run fast enough to stand still. As the figures show, we're actually doing worse. So it feels to me, unless we start addressing those sorts of questions, how can we really reduce income inequality or even keep people at the incomes they're at now? Because the figures show they're falling.
Okay, thank you. I'll take that one. Sure. So the decrease in the earnings was largely down to the downturn in the banking sector. Our economy was very high. The GVA figures were very high because of the large profits in the banking sector. When that saw a downturn in 2008, that changed quite dramatically, the average earnings. And it's dropped to 42,000, but that's still considerably higher. We're still in the top 10, I believe, of GVA per head per capita in the world. So despite it dropping, it was very high, but it's still higher. And we have more jobs. The important thing is when that dropped, the number of jobs didn't drop. We maintained the number of jobs, albeit some of them in the financial services sector were at lower salaries because of the changes to that industry. Of course, at the heart of this government plan is improving productivity. So the productivity figures are worked out, and for those of you that may not know this, by by business profits added to compensation of employees divided by the working population. I'm looking at officers over there to make sure I've got that right. And that gives you the GPA, that gives you our GPA figure per head, our productivity figures. So the only way we can, if we keep bringing in more people to do the work, the productivity can only go one way, can only decline. If business profits and wages aren't rising in line with the amount of new jobs we're creating, productivity will decrease. So that's why we have to improve that. That's doing more for less, and we aim to do that by embracing technology a lot more, right across all sectors, not just in financial services or the digital sector, but right across all sectors of the economy. And we're making funds available for productivity enhancements, for example, in the agricultural sector, where they'd be looking to use technology to reduce significantly the number of people they need to work in that industry. industry. And we're also looking at trying to make more money from that industry by embracing new crops, for example, tea and cannabis for medicinal purposes. But it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a long and challenging task to improve our productivity. And can I just add to that at the end? I think one of the reasons why our population has grown, when we look at how the Maastricht Treaty and how the borders have been opened amongst Europe, many here will say, well, thank goodness, because that allowed us to bring in many valuable and needed workers from Europe. But with that potentially changing and the value of sterling and the improving economies in the Eastern European countries, there's been less appetite for citizens in those countries to come away to work in the sterling area. So we've got potentially another employment crisis on, because underemployment is perhaps overemployment is perhaps as damaging as underemployment because it's very inflationary. So that's why we're moving quickly. We've got a trial scheme on now to try to utilise seasonal work permits, 9-month work permits, to fulfil a lot of those jobs in those sectors, and that will give people the right to come and work here for 9 months of the year, to repeat that, but not to gain permanent residential status, which should help us manage the population into the future. You decide with Mike.
I made the point partly because in Guernsey they've had a stable population and GVA has risen consistently, GVA per head of population, and it is now substantially higher than ours, plus house prices are considerably lower than ours. So it feels to me like getting on top of the population issue is one way to make sure that income equality does improve.
Yeah, I completely agree that getting on top of the population issue is the number one priority, has to be the number one priority for the future, for the medium and long-term future of the economy. But don't forget, in terms of the GVA figures, Guernsey never had a bigger banking sector. They're bigger in funds and other areas, but their banking sector was much, much smaller than Jersey's, hence there hasn't been the same fluctuations in their GVA. So, Bernie, and then John, and then...
I've got two quick ones, actually. 2 years ago, I went to a conference with the Chief Minister was addressing, and he stated that no state's employee was going to be paid less, shall I say, than £10.50 an hour, and that anybody supplying services to the states would have to pay the same to their staff. That was 2 years ago. Has that policy been implemented?
Judy.
Yeah, I know this because I asked when we were doing the government plan. Yes, it just happens that nobody in the States earns less than £10 an hour, but it's the contracts of anyone we have out are whatever the contract is now. As soon as they come up for renewal, whatever Caritas says the living wage should be, they will have to price that contract for the states as the people are going to be earning the living wage.
Right. So that's from now, because I know some service industry people that supply services on a ad hoc basis, not contracts. So I assume that those will be asked in future then.
I think that was covered in the actual proposition that was brought by the states. I think it was might be you, or it was you or Deputy Southern. I think it was definitely the contracts and depending on the services, and it had to be for so many hours if it was something, but I can find that out for you, Bernie. But yeah, that is the right way we're going, yes, definitely.
Okay, and the other thing is, on your pamphlet, you've got a lovely thing under spending, more money for the economy, arts and culture. Is that on top of the lottery money, or is that going to be lottery money?
The lottery money will be treated completely separately to that. It's a completely separate funding process, and the states agreed recently on to support a proposition of Deputy Tadier, the Assistant Minister with responsibility for that sector, to increase its funding to up to 1% of our annual budget, which over the government plan period will put approximately £2 million a year onto the monies paid to that sector. Sam, did you want to address something that Bernie said?
I was just going to clarify the point about the living wage. It was Deputy Sutherland's proposition. Obviously, I supported it at the time. It was for the states to seek accreditation as a living wage employer, and I'm also on the Living Wage Foundation Advisory Board in the island. And as Deputy Martin said, what happens when you become an accredited living wage employer is not that all of your contracts are also living wage value immediately. It's that you agree to the transition to it. So when your contracts come up for renewal, it then becomes a criterion that it must be at a living wage rate. So I don't know right now if there are still contracts below that, but when they come up for renewal, it will be a requirement that they go up to living wage, and that has been really positive. And I've heard from different agencies that engage with the government or different government departments that a lot of jobs that had seen outsourcing previously, the value from that outsourcing has simply not been gained because they've been bumped up to living wage. That might upset those who made the initial decisions to outsource, but I think that's a good thing because it means it's protected people's wages where they might otherwise have been attempted to drive them lower. So that's been actually a really key way of protecting those people's salaries.
Okay. I saw Mr. Baker here at the front.
Thanks. John Baker, Chairman of Jersey Action Group. I'd like to bring this back to tonight's topic and rental poverty, which is a major issue that Senator Mezek mentioned tonight. But my question comes back to that through asking our Assistant Minister, Senator Linda Farnham, who's the Economic Development Minister. And I have a very specific question for you about the government plan. What is the government's target for economic growth over the period of this plan? And I would like a specific figure, please. And the reason for me asking this question, strong economic growth will push population growth. Population growth will push house prices, will push rentals, which will increase rental poverty. So you see the reason for asking the question.
Absolutely. We haven't got an exact target. It's been almost impossible to fix an exact target simply because of the uncertainty with Brexit. Indeed, today the Fiscal Policy Panel at our request have been working on and published a report of what would happen to the economy in a no-deal Brexit, worst-case Brexit scenario. And those figures are quite telling. There would be inflation, there'd be a shrinking of the economy, there'd be a decrease in house prices. So that is something that could happen. So it's been very difficult for us to put exact figures on how we're going to grow the economy. On top of that, our policy is for growth, but before growth is productivity. So I would like to see, and the government would like to see, the value of our economy grow in excess of the resources we need for it to grow. And that is the policy. And as we get more certainty in the post-Brexit era, if it ever happens, then we'll start to be able to put some exact targets on our economic growth targets.
Okay, supplementary. So I'm disappointed because I asked the same question of our Chief Minister at the meeting up at Howdovers, and all he could tell me is that the government is interested in sustainable growth, but that wasn't a straight answer. My concern is that I've been told by a senior civil servant that Charlie Parker is pushing for strong economic growth, which, in terms of that would be good for the government, it would bring more profit to government. How do you balance your senior civil servant who has stated, maybe privately, that he wants strong economic growth, with what I believe should be the government's stance, that they don't want such strong growth because it's going to damage the population. It might not damage the economy, but it's going to keep Middle Jersey under pressure with tax and under pressure with rental poverty.
Let me deal with the comment related to the Chief Executive Officer. A lot of people put words into his mouth, and I'm not familiar with a lot of the conjecture I hear around that. I work closely, as we all do, with Mr. Parker, and he's servant of the government and the States Assembly. He doesn't push policies. He's there to deliver our policies. And from working with him and his team, that's exactly what they're doing. That's exactly what they're doing. So there's been no pressure on me, and as far as I'm concerned, other ministers on policy issues. Perhaps they could confirm that. When we say we want strong economic growth, we do want strong economic growth. We want the value of our economy to increase, but we want to do it without increasing the resource required. That's at the heart of this. We haven't got any answer to that, but that's what we're going to put all of our efforts into. And I instructed the staff in my department that productivity is going to be, improving our productivity, doing more with less resources is going to be at the centre of all of the decisions we're making when we come to look at growing the value of the economy.
Okay, I'll give you an opportunity to say something positive. You can tell us
that
how.
was really positive.
Yeah, even more positive.
Okay.
You're talking about productivity, so a lot of people won't be able to understand until you explain how artificial intelligence over the next decade is going to improve that productivity. And it really is one of the hopes that we've got, that we are able to maintain that economic growth without population increase. Thanks.
Well, there's, as we see the digital or the technological revolution, whatever we want to call it, is still gaining momentum. In financial services, members of staff are still engaged in a more basic administrative paper tasks that will all disappear, leaving many of those people free to be reskilled. Because as we lose jobs in certain areas, we're creating new jobs in other areas. So rather than having to bring people in to fill those jobs, we'll be able to upskill the existing workforce, and that's what Skills Jersey are doing under the remit of the Education Minister and Deputy Massol, who was with me the other day. Deputy Massol opened the new Digital Academy, and I can just say what a fantastic facility that is for young people. It was absolutely brilliant to see young people going in there on full-time graduate degree courses so we can produce some homegrown talent in that area. And of course agriculture, well, self-driving tractors and all this kind of thing, they are absolutely a reality. I wouldn't like to be at Parish Hall inquiry when one of those goes wrong, but it's that sort of technology that the agricultural sector are actually engaging in now. They're investing in it.
Okay. Good answer, thanks.
Thank you, John. Right, this lady.
We are hearing a great deal about future plans to combat income inequality. I would like to bring it more up to the present day. In 2 weeks' time, pensions and benefits are going to be increased by £5.67 per week. But for those who are also reliant on income support assistance, half of that is being clawed back by a reduction in income support, so that their net increase will be in the region of £3 per week. How is that reducing income inequality?
Thank you.
Thank you. When I took my the job last year, there was not enough time to really look at the figures. We had a few million to spend, and everything got uprated. And this year, when we were looking, we had some money to spend. That we wanted to up the disregard for people who are working. So we're spending the same amount of money. There will be the pension, as you said, there will be an extra benefit, and people who are working will be keeping an extra 26, well, it will be 26p in each pound that they are working. So we're spending the same money, but we found we had more workers, so this is the fairest way to help most people.
So the old and the sick have to be penalised for that purpose, is that it?
The pensioners are on a different, they are on a completely different, they will get an upgrade. This is only people on income support who are working, and then the other income support went up 1.9%, and then 26p in the pound you keep.
Can I add to that, Judy, that one of the key points in this part of the government plan is to develop proposals to improve financial independence in old age. So that's one of the key elements of the Social Security Review in 2020. And I know it's not now, I know it's next year, and it might not kick in, but one of the ambitions of this plan is to ensure that the elderly are not disadvantaged annually when we see these sort of increases. We want to see at least the maintenance of where they are and an increase wherever possible.
Well, obviously, most pensioners, if they have other independent means, other private pensions, they will be deriving the benefit of the full increase. But it is only those who are not in that position and who are reliant on income support that are not getting that benefit. Those most in need are the ones having it clawed back.
Yeah, we fully understand that, and that's why, that's one of the core reasons why we're having the Social Security review next year to address these issues.
Very necessary, and I hope it comes very soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Mars again.
So coming back to the discussion on income equality, what our stats show is that the areas where you have the most income inequality are pensioners who are receiving about half as much as pensioners in the UK, which is quite a significant difference, plus single parent households. And I've heard a little bit about your ambitions for pensioners, and I suppose it's not going to be all the pensioners. Some are receiving more than just the state's pension, but there's also the single parent household. So how are you actually addressing these, if you like, the more extreme elements of where we're finding income equality according to our own statistics?
Thank you. Judy.
Well, I've always been told that our pensions over here are higher than the UK, and I'm sure that I'm correct on that. Obviously, most people could yes. I've just spent 5 weeks in London with 2 elderly parents on very poor pensions, and one on a 4. But I've always been told across the board that they are better. The single parent component, which we have in the government plan put the money in to reintroduce, is going back in. So if you're a single parent of 3 children, you get that extra, I think it's 42, off the top of my head, £42 something a week. And that was taken away, but it's now gone back in. Is that what you meant about a single parent component?
I'm just a little surprised because when you look at the income equality statistics published by our own stats department, that difference between our pensioners and the UK pensioners is quite evident. So, and it does sound rather like we're doing, you're talking about tweaking rather than a more substantial. I mean, income inequality actually is a problem for the whole society, so we don't seem to be doing anything more too substantial to address this. This sounds a bit like tweaking and also saying what you have said is, well, our pensioners aren't as bad as those pensioners, when in fact our statistics say otherwise.
No, I didn't say they weren't. I said I thought we had different. You said a figure, and I thought the figure was wrong, and I still think it's wrong. I do think they earn more, get more. Is that right? Are we doing enough? And we are doing. The majority of the reviews start in 2020, so we can't do it now. We haven't had enough time. But the pension, that if we brought in a work-based pension, it wouldn't really help, unfortunately, the pensioners now. So there will be things we have to think about and look at. But again, if people had thought about that 30 years ago, then people would have been helped, and it just wasn't done. So we've got to do things that we know we can do. We've got to do things that people are working at. We're coming out of their own money. We need to look at a different system for the people who have already retired and see if there is anything we can do.
Right, I think I've got as much as an answer I'll get. But I would ask you to perhaps check with our own statistic units about the...
I will. I definitely will find out.
I've had that discussion.
Hello again. I hear quite a lot of things of we need to look into this and we'll have a look into this and we'll do something about it and we'll look into something or other and we'll investigate something, and that's great. I'm all for investigation, that's all brilliant, and that needs to be done. And you just said if people did it 30 years ago, we would be in a different place now. I hope that I won't be sitting in a meeting 30 years hearing that self-same statement again. What I would like to see is when is this going to get backed up by legislation? Because it's all nice to make plans and to have great ideas, but things like gender pay gaps need to be backed up with legislation. Things like we want to get people with disabilities, be they physical, mental or otherwise, back into a workforce needs to be backed up by legislation. No employer will employ people, and if they keep them employed, they will give them a hard time. So unless there is legislation which opens up the doors for people to get into jobs which suits their ability, because let's face it, everybody in this country has an ability to contribute, and a lot of people, the majority of people, want to contribute in some way, shape or form for their own self-worth, to contribute to the society they live in, and they haven't got the opportunity. I hear you say you want to get people back into work. If you're looking at part-time work or shorter worker hours or whatever, it is really difficult to get that sort of work. So what I would really like to hear from you is, once you've, when are you going to finish looking into things, because you've been doing this all evening, and what are you going to put into legislation? Because I want to see something hard and fast so that I can say the law says therefore, because otherwise we'll be going around the pudding and the employer will always sit at the longer end of that wedge, and the person who needs a job hasn't got a chance to get in there. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I then I'll hand over to Judy and Sam, because I know these are areas where they've both been politically very interested in the past. But that is the whole idea of this government plan. Before we produce budgets and medium-term financial plans, they've all been about finances. This is the first time, and it's not perfect because it's the first time we've done it, and this process will evolve in the years ahead. This actually is a plan of what we are going to do. This is a commitment to doing things, and if you read the plan, there's a list of things we're going to do. It might not be a comprehensive list, and it might not cover everything that all of you might want it to cover, but I think it's a good platform to start something we can improve into the future. Now, legislation on employment, on prescribing how people and who can be employed, I think is quite difficult. But where we do need to start is understanding the gender pay gap. And there are political discussions going on at the moment about whether it's legislation to ask businesses to publish the gender pay differences. Those are the sort of discussions that are going on. How that might materialise, I don't know. But before we can discuss imposing legislation on businesses, we need to understand the size of the problem. So perhaps Sam and Judy would like to comment further.
I'll be 100% honest and say that this isn't necessarily a very inspiring answer, but I find it one of the most frustrating parts of the job how long it can take actually to get good legislation together when the intentions are good. So there are some decisions that the States Assembly has made that have been positive decisions that we've not carried out yet, like, for example, banning discrimination against tenants with children, something very important that we need to do. That hasn't been able to happen as quickly as I would have liked it to, because you have to identify potentially hundreds of other bits of connected legislation that have to be dealt with, and that can take a long time. But what I can say is that what is outlined in the government plan in terms of improving tenants' rights, improving our children's legislation, I'm confident that we've got a good plan for that. But if we wanted legislation to be passed quicker, then I think that would probably require reforming our entire government system, and then we'd have a whole other type of debate there, wouldn't we?
Well, I did say in my comments I want to work a lot more with the disability strategy and who's going to help people into work. We know we've got Jersey Employment Trust, and there's a lot of employers who will take people, rightly so, with I work with these companies, and they do take people, and they sometimes go out their way to make a job for somebody and just needs a little bit of tweaking. So you hear one story. If you've got some specific story, obviously I'll speak to you later. I wouldn't want to get into one person story here, but that's what, and this year, the strategy came in 17 and it had no really officers, not much money backing it up. We've put money in this government plan and now we've got people and we're working with all the communities, the parishes closer to home to find out what's there, find out who wants to work and find out where they can work and to do everything possible to make sure that they will be able to go and do that job. And I'm sorry you feel that we've done nothing, but we are doing a lot on the gender pay gap. I've been to a couple of presentations. It has all been collated and collected. The report was delivered in the States Assembly by Deputy Louise Dublé about 3 months ago. And we know we have a problem. How we address that problem is got to be done, because if you're, it isn't right. The job's the job, the wages should be the wages for that job, whatever sex you are. So we are doing a lot on it.
There is political momentum.
Yes.
There is political momentum, and I invited Deputy Dublé recently to come and address the council ministers with any proposals or ideas she might have, which might bring in rules or some regulations to assist with that. Gentleman behind Mr. Baker and Mr. Pink.
Just to change tack for a moment, I went to the environmental one. To be quite honest, there's some quite woolly thinking on transport policy. On the one hand, reducing the reliance on internal combustion engine. On the other hand, not really being very clear about what a good bus service is or how to free up roads. So you've said that you want to make more land available for housing. How closely are you working with the island plan to ensure that? And also, there's currently proposals for some really important things in St Helier, which are going to be dealt with by supplementary planning guidance, which can go through simply because the Minister says so, without any reference to the States, specifically about height restrictions in St Helier. So how closely are you working with the island plan to make sure that what you want to happen will happen?
So the Environment Minister and the Assistant Environment Minister both serve on the Housing Policy Development Board, and that's one way that we get our ambitions that we're working on in terms of housing options we're looking at that then get translated to them to feedback into the island plan as that's built up. But that, we've still got a long way to go on that. That's going to be a state's debate that will probably last 2 weeks or something like that. It's going to be very enjoyable, I'm sure. So I work very closely with the Environment Minister, but we are still in relatively early days before getting a document that is passed and in force. And I've made my views perfectly clear as Minister that as well as looking into the affordability issues, the issues of quality of life are incredibly important, and if it is the case that we go higher in St Helier, which I'm not against, it has to be done properly with conditions on what amenity space there is, protecting open green space, transport as well. The States recently rejected part of a proposition on buses, but approved another part about looking at sustainable transport and what can be done there. And I was misquoted in the JP today about being said that I support building on green fields, and I certainly do not. I think that's absolutely a last resort wherever possible.
And the political thinking is very much in terms of the island plan is to try and stay out of the countryside as much as possible and make better use of housing stock in the towns. And that's I think will be driving the island plan, that sort of thinking. Judy, did you want to add anything? No. Good. John.
Okay, let's get back on topic and talk about tax reform. Government plan, lots of great things, lots of spending, but if you to spend, you've got to tax people. We've heard about tax reform, but we only hear about reform of personal tax. What about corporate tax? What about the big corporations? Let me give you an example. I'm a retailer. I paid £20,000 last year in tax. That contributes to these positive things. One of my competitors, Amazon, pays nothing. They don't even contribute to GST, or hardly anything at all. So what about the government addressing the elephant in the room, 010, corporate tax, the big corporations that hold millions of pounds of profit in this island, in the banks and the financial corporations, and that operate, sell into lots of houses, and it's not just Amazon, lots of other big corporations. So instead of targeting Middle Jersey to pay for all of this, why don't you look at the corporations? Thanks.
You probably know, John, that the 010 situation was not about making, and it was taken out of our hands by a decision by the Isle of Man some time ago, revolving around the zero corporation tax and their common purse VAT agreement with the UK. I won't go into the detail now, but as a result of that, we face serious pressure in Jersey to retain a lot of our financial service businesses in Jersey, to retain the head office function. We had to compete, which we did shortly afterwards. That was ruled as a harmful tax. The zero corporation tax was ruled as a harmful tax practice by the OECD, and the 010 situation came in, so that is corporation businesses are generally taxed at zero rate, with the exception, for example, all financial services regulated entities are taxed at 10%. There's a new retail tax for large retailers, which I disagree with. I think if we're going to have a retail tax, it should be 10%, the same as regulated entities. And that's a discussion that we're having now internally. In terms of the consumption taxes, the EU and the UK, whether they're out of the UK, have committed, as I understand it, to bringing in legislation across the whole jurisdiction that will require online businesses to collect and pay the consumption taxes in the various countries. For example, let's take Amazon, for example. When we buy things on Amazon, we get our tax deducted, but we don't pay GST. I think everything imported should have GST, but we can't collect it in the way we collect it now. It's not viable. Amazon will have to do that. So when we buy something from Amazon, what should happen, as I understand, will happen, because it will be law in the relevant countries that they're based in, that they deduct the VAT and they put the GST on, and then they pay directly to the relevant treasuries in the relevant countries, and that's going to happen.
When?
I think the EU commitment is 2023.
That might be the case. You know that in France they're actually starting to target the big corporations now, and they're introducing levies.
Well, and the OECD are now addressing the zero corporation tax issue again, so things could be changing.
Okay, so during the course of this plan, is this government going to continue to target personal tax, or will you be reviewing, other than the GST, anything to do with any other sort of tax?
Well, we're reviewing taxes, but the aim is to keep taxes as low and as fair as possible. That's the plan. So, we can ask my colleagues here. My view is, and I've said it, no new taxes until we've got the efficiencies, buttoned down to the detail. It's important that the public sector we're delivering the best possible service, the most efficient service, at the most cost-effective rate. We've got to deliver that, and Charlie Parker and the team are focused and dedicated to doing that, and they've made good progress. So I think the political thinking, and there's no real plans in here for new or increases in income taxes. I know we have, if we've taken our ministerial sort of partnership away, I know the Reform Party have some ideas on personal taxation, and those are important debates that are going to be happening in the Assembly over the course of this plan. But I would hope that we don't see any increases in any taxation during the time of this.
So no stealth taxes?
Not that I'm aware of, and I certainly would.
You heard it here first.
Yeah. So, and I would certainly be persuaded, and I'll give Sam and Julie the opportunity if they would like to voice an opinion on that issue. They're not looking very enthusiastic about it.
Well, you know my opinion. It was in my election manifesto, I support higher taxes on the wealthy. And I brought an amendment to the previous budget to achieve that, which would have freed up funding to put back into our public services. I continue to support that, but irrespective of whether that goes through or not, I'll continue to work my best with the system as we have it.
Can I switch? We've got from the Facebook audience a question. from Mr. Glyn Mitchell. Does economic growth come before quality of life and reinvestment back into Jersey's ecosystem? Services which ultimately economic growth depends. Well, I mean, as this plan suggests, I think it all goes hand in hand. There's no, without economic prosperity, we don't have the money to pay for all of the other, services that we need. The income support. How much are we paying in income support, Judy, on an annual basis? And the cost of putting money in to help the less financially. Well, 70 million. 70 million pounds a year. Is one example. And we want to help people more, we want to help the elderly more, so we need economic prosperity to do that. But we've also identified in the plan the value of the environment and the value of ecology, so it all goes very much hand in hand. Yes.
My name is Lindsay Falcon. Given the amount of time that it's taken the Council of Ministers to deliver the plan itself, and I would actually describe it as rather an ambitious manifesto. We've heard a lot about ambitions this evening. And given the backdrop of the amount of organisational change, as well as the fact that the efficiencies are very unclear at the moment, what those are going to be, how confident are ministers that the plan is actually achievable given the timescale?
Shall I start? Yes. Well, of course, this is only a draft plan and is likely to be subject to amendment, and so we're not quite sure what the final plan looks like. It is an ambitious plan, but I would rather have an ambitious plan and get 90% of it done than have an unambitious plan and complete it. And I think we're pushing ourselves here, we're testing ourselves. And this is not a manifesto full of platitudes. These are actions written down here in the plan in black and white that the government are going to attempt to deliver. So it's tangible. We'll be able to tick off delivered, delivered, delivered. So, it is holding the government to account, producing this. And I think importantly, it's the first time we've actually put a narrative to the budgets. So we've listed the ambitions have been turned into ideas, turned into action points, and the costings accompany that. So I think it is realistic. I think if we all work hard, if we all pull together, we can deliver it.
The view that I've given to the Chief Minister and the Chief Executive is that the headline figure for efficiencies that this plan is after is a very large figure, and that will cause lots of consternation, not just amongst people who work in the States, but the wider public as well. My position is clear that where genuine efficiencies can be found, that's a good thing, but I don't want to see any services cut. That is meant to be the ambition that is in here, and the benefit we get of the flexibility of the government plan process as opposed to the previous MTFP process, it means that year on year, as the picture becomes clearer, we have the ability to change course if we need to. There are going to be, I think, very difficult debates on the efficiencies. It's something that concerns me because I want to make sure that we get this right so that we can invest in the ambitions in this plan, not least of all the ones that fall within my portfolio, because I want to be able to say every time we've achieved something, look, this is a good thing that shows that politics can deliver for people if people work towards it. But we have to be extremely careful on this. But the process we have for this is substantially better than previous processes we've had, where it's just felt like it's been perpetual efficiencies that have never ended up being finished in the end.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I've probably watched this process for the last 20 years and got to the point where I think, something's going to happen. This started with a P1, and then we had OneGov, and we had Team Jersey, and we're trying to work across departments. Take my department. Everybody thinks it's still social security down at the Mott Street, it's customer and local services. You lose your job, you can, this like is the operational bit, but you can get so much done down there, and there's skills being developed by the staff down there, and it is great to see. But you started off by saying it's all happening at once. It's, you know, this at the backdrop we've got this going on. We've produced a government plan that's taken. We did it in time, but it was a long time to get to where we are, and now we've done it once. Again, it was a new team, new system, new way of working. But I think if, like Senator Farnham and Senator Messick say, there's a lot of good in this, and if we can get to the end of it, we will be doing what the people of Jersey have said to me for years. You need to do this better. Why have you got someone there doing this and it doesn't work with that, and they don't talk to them? It is moving. We see it probably because we're seeing it daily, and we want it to work for you, the public, who are using the services, who need the services. And I'm sure you might not see it as quick as you want. You're not seeing it as quick as you want, obviously. But if we get to the end and we get it through, as Senator said, even if it's only 90%, it will start building on what we are going to do. These are not manifestos, these are actual actions that we are going to do. Thank you.
And do you have a supplementary, Lindsay? Or?
I suppose, yeah, I will ask actually. This year we've seen unprecedented public sector strikes in the island around the public sector pay awards. Is there anything within the government plan which is going to protect against similar action happening in future years? Is there a commitment within the government plan to provide public sector staff with the types of pay awards that is going to prevent that type of industrial action in the future years?
Well, there's certainly funding built in that takes into account pay increases for public sector workers, but I can't foresee any events or what events might be around the corner that might cause further strike. I hope we're getting to the end of the day where workers feel they need to strike. My daughter's a teacher, and I think one thing that the strike action of teachers has helped to identify is how schools are resourced, and that's raised a problem. That's raised a new issue, because actually there are quite worrying shortages of teachers, not just in Jersey, but in the UK and in the EU, and the same with other skills, key health workers. Now that's not as a result of any government policy or state's policy. That is because there are a shortage of these people available in the UK and the EU. Sam, did you want to talk about workers? As a voice here for a supporter.
Well, it's a different, it's certainly a different angle. I've marched alongside public sector workers. So I think that if you are serious about addressing income inequality, then that means you have to protect people's wages year in and year out, and don't allow people's standard of living to reduce. We've had 10 years of real-time earnings flatlining, and to a degree that has been because those at the upper end of the spectrum have been earning substantially more in that time. The number of people earning above £1 million a year quadrupled at the same time that relative poverty was increasing. I hope that the legacy of this government plan will be the reversal of that trend. That I don't think is too radical an ambition to say that we shouldn't have that perpetual trend where people get more unequal over time. And there'll be a lot of work to do, and it will require work outside of this government plan as well, not just the ambitions in here. But that should be our ambitions, that life gets better for ordinary people, not worse. And I've not enjoyed the past year of being at odds with the government position on this and having to march alongside public sector workers. It's not fun doing it. You wish people didn't feel the need to be in that situation. But we can only do our best.
Okay, thank you. Moz, and then John, and then I think that would be just about it.
I just wanted to come back to this question that had been raised about productivity and the discussion about AI, because what McKinsey said about AI is that people most likely to be affected are women in their 30s and 50s doing doing administrative jobs, that they're the ones that are most likely to be affected within our own finance industry. So this, so you discussed this initiative of the Skills Academy and what it's doing for young people, but I'm kind of concerned that there is a whole area of this current population who may well be affected, and there aren't real concrete plans to form that safety net for them. And in addition, let's not forget that in order to maintain AI, you actually need to keep it updated, you need to keep it secure. I've actually seen an estimate that you actually probably need to earn about 4% even to maintain and do this. So when you talk about the plans for economy and productivity, you probably do need to have a target.
Yes, I agree, and I think as the world starts to understand AI more and how it might help, we will start to be able to put targets together. But we spoke about upskilling before, and I think those likely to be displaced by AI have the greatest opportunities in upskilling to go into higher paid roles. And that's the aim. Now I'm looking at my colleague Deputy Massol, who is the Assistant Education Minister, and I'm going to give him the unique opportunity to comment should he so wish.
That's very kind of you. Just conscious you do have this is online, so thank you very much.
Yes.
For the mic there. Yes, this is covered more in CSP3, so the strand looking at the economy, and you're absolutely right, Mons. And what I would say is one of the benefits is actually this government has actually recognised the importance of the skills strategy, particularly something which I've been banging on about, is particularly the retraining strategy. And that's not just for people on income support, that is exactly the people kind of in the middle, and how do we support them, and how do we develop the skills strategy to be more flexible in order to support people to retrain, because there is that ability to sidestep into different sectors, and it's definitely something which is on the government radar. It is still something which needs to be thought through properly, and how it's going to work, and how do we support people who want to switch through careers. So I've actually just had an email tonight from someone saying, you know, I want to go into nursing, but my husband earns too much, and actually I don't have enough to actually support me through the course in order to do it. So you're bang on, absolutely asking, that's totally the right question to ask. But what I would say is actually we've acknowledged that through the government plan, that actually this is an area which requires policy development. So it is something which I've got such a passion about, not only because after 11 years in the States, of course, I'm woefully de-skilled, and therefore I need these services, but also because actually, as you say, with AI, it's incredibly important that we build that workforce that is adaptable and is open to change, because people are going to have so many different jobs in the future. And I could grandstand and talk about this area forever, but it's something which is very firm on the government's radar.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you very much.
Can I just follow
we're
that?
close to our time, so
Because the other aspect of though, when we're talking about AI, is you can be a user, or you can be actually somebody who creates AI. And we don't seem to have done a lot. Jersey's far behind in this particular latter area, which is one of those areas that does actually is very productive. We are in danger of just being a kind of an island that just pays to use it. So I know you're going to have another discussion about the economy, so just wait for my question there.
Moz, thank you. Can I just say that the Technology Advisory Panel has just commissioned a report on the opportunities and challenges presented by AI, and that's a piece of work that's going on now. Okay, so we are addressing it.
Okay, quick question.
Yeah.
Jersey has the worst voter engagement of any of the 39 OECD countries. That was in a recent JP report. I'm just not making it up. What is this government going to do about improving voter and community engagement?
Well, I'm not sure what it's up to the people. I'm not sure what politicians can do to change that. I'm not in favour personally of making voting compulsory. I think it's actually undemocratic. Australia are at the top of the civic engagement list, 100%, because they have compulsory voting. So if we wanted to make sure everybody voted, that's one way we could do it, but I don't think that would find political favour. So there's been different views. Some people say that people don't vote because they feel disenfranchised, they feel that they're not listened to. And you've got, so that's correct for some sectors of our society. Some sectors of our society, I think, are very comfortable, and if we were going to double, if we were going to double our income tax rate to 40%, I think we'd get a very good turnout at the next election. So I don't think there's any easy ways. People have spoken about party politics. I don't support party politics. I think in Jersey we're independent. We have been for centuries, and when I've worked with parties in the UK, and I've had a lot of engagement with politicians from national level, from cabinet level to town council level, and the biggest acrimony I find is in the parties, not between them. So I'm not sure. I wonder if Sam or Judy would like to add to that.
I disagree with the last point.
What about postal voting, online voting? You say you can't do anything.
Well, that's all. Of course, we've got postal voting. We can and we are introducing work streams that improve that, looking at online registration first, and then potentially online voting into the future. But those are not easy issues to deal with because of the when you're voting and there's a coercion that can, you need to be free to make your vote unhindered, without coercion. And there are some when you're voting, who's not to say that somebody's standing over you and saying you will vote that way. There's a very good and old reason why people go into the voting booth.
So let's do one thing. What about registration? What about one-time registration? So you don't have to register every year.
Yeah, there's good points. Jeremy, we're going over time a bit. I'm going to...
As part of the EDOC programme, the idea of developing your digital ID, and part of that, what we want to do is a centralised electoral register, taking away from the parishes. I know, heresy. But the idea is you can do that, so you can do, instead of having this rolling electoral register, you've got one database, you do it once you're on the system, and then whether you choose to participate or not, that is your choice, but it's not down to the system issue.
Roll on. So one final question.
Well, just a very quick one, and I'm not expecting you to put that into this financial plan. I'm just going to throw you a wild idea, because we've been talking about efficiencies, with my economic hat on, means job losses because employees are expensive. We've talked a lot about income inequality and people who haven't got enough income, and I'm thinking, what about universal basic income that will free people up to get the anxiety out of there? You haven't got people fretting about their food. You get your mental health up, you get your physical health up because your mental health is better. You give people the opportunity to work in the third sector, to do all those jobs which don't pay properly, to go and work in the more social, more meaningful environments, to do all the good jobs where you can't find the jobs for. So it's just a thought for you to play with for the next plan and thereafter to see. Just think a bit bigger on the income side rather than to trick a bit of tax here and there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll take that on board. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all very much for being here. On behalf of Judy and Sam, thank you very much for your interest. Thank you for your questions. We'll be around, I think, for another 5 or 10 minutes if anyone wants to speak to us. Can I also thank our team, our communications team, for helping us put this on tonight. Thank you very much.